So now that I've got those mapped in, I'm just going to put a glaze from that edge, not quite as far as where I've put that dark colour, just a little bit in from that. Another glaze of water all the way down, and you can be a little bit more careful on this one. If you've got any wobbly edges anywhere, now's the time to get rid of them. I've got a nice soft glaze to work over the top, so we want the next one to be as soft, but maybe just a little bit darker in tone. I'm going to take it right over the root colour at the bottom, just to give me a chance that if the paint does follow, I can lift it away. Give that colour, nice deep colour, a good stir, and drop it in where you need the darkest tones. Just slow down when you get to the edges. Very important those edges stay neat. Just going to add a tiny bit more yellow to it. It's just not quite dark enough. A little bit more yellow and a little bit more magenta. And just drop that around. I'm going to drop it around the highlights this time rather than lift them out, because the highlights are already coloured, so I don't want them to go any darker. Slowly on that edge. Just be careful when you get to the edges that you don't go too dark, and also when you get to your little areas that you've lifted out, make sure you take the colour around those as well, because we don't want to lose them again. Just going to add a bit more quinacridone magenta just to make it a bit more lively down here. It's quite bright, the colour underneath here. You can see it's just drying out there, so I'm just going to clean my brush and just give a little bit of water to that edge so that it stays nice and soft. It's always worth keeping an eye on that so that you don't get any hard edges. Up here it doesn't matter too much because we've got a nice little pattern up here that we need to mimic, so that's coming across in quite a sharp line. I'm going to keep dropping more colour in while it's damp to finish off this part of the painting. So all those layers are dry, and I've rubbed out the pencil line now, and it's all gone completely, so that's great. So now we can start putting some character into the turnip, a few little cracks and blemishes here and there. I've kept hold of the dark brown colour that I mixed with the primary colours, and I'm just going to use that, and anywhere where it's not bright enough or dark enough, I'll just add a little bit more pigment as I go. So we'll put in these little blemishes around here. I have a feeling these aren't going to be bright enough, so we might use a little bit of titanium white to mix in with them later on, but we'll see how they dry. A little bit of that heart shape there. Just map these in very lightly. We'll just see how they dry, come back to them later. Draw them on and just hoover out a bit of light because they're darker on the edges than they are in the middle. So just using a damp brush just to lift out the excess paint that we don't need. Then just get that brown onto your tip of your brush and draw in these little cracks underneath. You don't have to include them, but I think it does give a little bit of character to the turnip. Probably just picked it just right before it was eaten by all the bugs. So just draw away on this one. What I do is get a little section drawn in and then run a damp brush into the centre there so that it gives a nice indication of a cut into the body of the turnip. Pick up some more colour and continue up into the main section. Now you can mix and match. I've got a little bit of the purple colour here, so we can put that in as well. Just draw it on where you feel you need it. Clean your brush and soften one edge where it just softens into the body of the turnip there. Anywhere where it gets really dark, just add a little bit more French ultramarine, and you can just drop that in while the glaze is still wet. Put a little bit more down here. I'm going to continue with this colour down the taper root here, and just draw on all the little wiggly details. I'm just going to add a little bit of cadmium yellow pale to that to lighten it up, and glaze over the top part of the turnip here where it's gone very sort of dry and yellowy. Just put this on wet over dry, and you can actually glaze right over all those little leaf ends. Take some of the purple with it, a little bit anyway, give it a little bit more of an earthy colour, and drop some of this colour as well here and there on the top of the turnip and round the side. Now, a good little tip while this is drying is you can take some of the purple and just wiggle that through that settling glaze to get some nice little bits of texture through the top here. So just use the tip of your brush here and let it sort of dance through the settling glaze and create that nice earthy look to the top of the turnip. You could also darken the top here with a little bit more of the purple just to give it a bit more form. While that section's drying, we're going to add a little bit more detail to the leaves at the top. I should just mix up another fresh batch of green. This time I'm going to use the lemon yellow as the base, sorry, cadmium lemon, with a little bit of Windsor blue green shade, a little bit of French ultramarine. Go heavy on the cadmium lemon because that will fade, so I want a good puddle of that. So here you need to look a little bit more carefully at what detail you're going to put in, and I'm just going to keep it very minimal on here because there's not a great deal of veining visible. Just going to add a little bit of red to that. It's a little bit bright, a little bit of cadmium red there. What I'm going to do is just paint the little green areas in between some of the veins that I can see here. They're very subtle, but a little bit of detail is required just on that corner there. I'm just going to add a touch more Windsor blue green shade. I do quite like to adjust the colours as I go because then you get these nice little subtle changes here and there. I'm taking some of that green down the stem a little way on the underneath, a little bit of water, and just soften that in so you get a nice idea of it being deeper on the underneath. And a little bit more colour as we come down to the base, leaving a little highlight in between. Just drag a damp brush between those two little strands of green just so it softens it, and a little bit to one side so we don't lose the light, and then soften it down into the stem. And I'll continue to do that through across all the other little green stems. So now your turnip's lovely and dry and ready for all the little finishing details. I'm going to mix up a colour using indigo. This is one of those dangerous colours that you only use once you've got paint on the paper. It's very, very dark, and if I mix that, I'm just going to mix it into an existing quinacridone magenta patch that I had there and add a little bit of cadmium red deep. So it's got a little bit of all the colours in there, and I'm just going to put a little tiny bit of that to one side of each of these leaf ends, I suppose they are. And again, you can go as detailed as you would be comfortable doing. You can add more or less. Just remember now that you've got several layers on, so it's better to keep the amount of paint that you're putting on each time a little bit drier. One or two little shadows where the turnip's damaged, tiny little bit more depth of colour in there. You can also use the dry brush method where you flatten the brush against the paint on the palette and pick up a little bit of colour just to dry brush on some darker areas here and there. We're also going to put a little bit of shadow underneath on the taper root very carefully right over the whole root where it's in the shadow of the turnip. Just glaze over till you get to the point where it comes out of the shadow and finish there. You can also use that shadow colour to put some little bits of shadow onto the root where it's twisting over itself, and one or two little shadows down the length of the root, just to give it more prominence on the paper and give you some idea of where these little roots are travelling. And a little bit more shadow down one side of the tapering root as well. I'm just going to add a little bit more of the quinacridone magenta, just on its own. Quite a dry mix, again using the dry brush method where I've flattened the brush out. I can just add a little bit more of this lovely dual colour here and there. And there we have it, our finished turnip portrait.
Now available to buy. Try these techniques at home whenever you wish. The DVD of today's workshop and the book that accompanies this series are now available to order from the Painting and Drawing channel. For further information and to order your copy, go to www.paintingdrawingchannel.com.